things people talk about on Saturday set all of the elements.
Hello, everybody. Dr. Rick Wallace dropping in on you. I hope that everybody is having a good day. This is a video that I would normally stream live from my Black Voice channel on YouTube. Most things concerning the Black community, I like to stream from there because that's where the strongest backing and the most like-minded thinking is. I tend to keep things on Facebook Inspirational. I also have a new channel for the Visionetics Institute as far as the inspirational, motivational, instructional, and empowerment stuff goes. And we are rebuilding that. There's a lot that's gone on over the last year that's caused us to kind of have to restructure and rebuild, remodel some things from the business side, from the media side. But one thing that I have been committed to is using platforms that I create and position myself in to provide a voice for my Black brothers and sisters, the Black community as a collective. I have done this for as long as I can remember, long before social media became a thing, long before MySpace and all that hit. I was doing it on a grassroots level. And in 2005, I launched the Odyssey Project, which is really taking my company, Odyssey Entertainment, and putting it to better use. The media arm, Odyssey Media Group, covers Black Voice, the Black Voice, which is a video, radio medium and mechanism we use to share. It's a part of New Black Media. I'm proud to be connected with some people who have worked tirelessly at giving a voice to our people, at calling out the BS, at bringing things in an accurate sense to what's really going on, to providing context to what is happening. And this thing that's going on with the murder of George Floyd is definitely no different. It's just a more sensationalized and heightened sense of tension and terror. And I want to talk about that. Before I do, I want to encourage everybody that's familiar with the work I've done in the past through the Odyssey Project, the Black Man Lead Rite of Passage Initiative. I've shared that many times. There's a Black Man Lead page. The Odyssey Project, there's an Odyssey Project page. You can go to the site at www.theodysseyproject21.top and look at all the work that has been done, that is being done, and that we're planning to do. As a matter of fact, we're in the process now of booking a 15-city tour. No, this is not simply a lecture tour. This is not something where I'm going in and I'm charging people to hear me speak. I'm literally right now in the process of raising money so that I can go into 15 of the most impacted urban areas in the United States and help them implement programs that I have created over the last 15 to 20 years, including Black Men Lead, Music is Life, Black Empowerment Initiative, along with my wife with Restoring Ghetto's Forgotten Daughters. We are committed to making a change, and we're raising money to do it because I don't want to charge to go in and do it. So all I'm looking for is to cover travel expenses, lodging expenses, and time. And I'm going to go in each one of these places. I did have a list. Of course, it wouldn't be out right now, would it? The cities that we have on the list, and then I'm building a committee to help me name the remainders. But we have Cleveland, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Charlotte, Chicago, St. Louis, Miami, Los Angeles, New Orleans, and Detroit. Obviously, Houston and Dallas are going to be covered. Those are places that I've spent time in recently. I'm a Houstonian by birth. I spent about 5 to 6 years living in Dallas. And so those places are definitely going to be covered. And those are places that I'm either in or that I can drive to. So that's not even something we got to raise funds for. That's something I can just do because I have strong connections in Dallas. So I'm going to be in that city a lot anyway. So for those who want to support me, the information is in the description box of this video. It'll be in the description box of any video on any platform, whether YouTube, Facebook, wherever. So that's out of the way. Let's talk. There are a couple of things I want to talk about. I want to get to the coroner's findings. The county coroner, or the coroner that was used by the city government there in the Twin City area. I think Minneapolis, and I know St. Paul has been catching hell as well. But I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the new independent medical examiner, coroner, that was brought in to do an examination, and how conflicting those stories and reports are. Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute, but what I want to first talk about is one of the things that we're committed to doing in New Black Media is putting you up on game. It's literally bringing you to a point and showing you the difference between what's actually happening and what you're being told is happening. They are always in contrast. They're always diametrically opposed. There's always an angle. There's always something being done that is using media interference or media conditioning or media presentation to paint a narrative that takes you off of the focal point and puts you in another place, or gets you riled up and revved up and focused on something that really and truly does not matter. What I want to do is point you to something real crazy. If you actually pay attention, and I noticed this from the beginning, is that when they were showing the rioting, when they were showing all of the things that were going on, the one thing I noticed is there are a lot of people that don't look like me out there in those streets. Am I the only one that sees that? So I started making phone calls, and I started getting reports from people who either have boots on the ground or have somebody there. And they're saying there's a lot of agents. There are a lot of instigators. There are instigators from the police department. There are instigators from Antifa. There are people there that don't have any interest in what's really happening with the murder of George Floyd. They're there to capitalize on the energy, and they're going to leave us hanging and holding the bag if we're not careful. Now, I have no qualms, and I am not concerned with the burning down of anything. Matter of fact, I had a person come on a few weeks ago on one of my posts and told me off. White person told me because I'm so focused on black, and I'm talking about black first and black always, and all the things that I had said, that I was the problem, and I was a racist, and I was full of hate, and I was teaching hate, and that I was going to burn in hell. And my response to him was real simple. I checked him about having the audacity to think he has a right to even tell me how to feel about something that has been done to me by people who look like him. And in no certain terms, I ate his ass on that. But the other thing I told him is, when it comes to burning, I have no problem with burning as long as you MFs burn too. And that's how I feel. My thing is, if the system comes down with my demise, I can live with that. I can live with that because that means my grandbabies are going to live in a different world that I helped create. Because the system as it stands does not house my dreams. It does not house my desires. It does not house my aspirations for my lineage and my offsprings, my progeny. It does not have a place for what I see for my children. And so I have no desire to sustain it, uphold it, because it's what I've known my entire life. And that's one of the things that I want you to understand, that to have the things that your heart is yearning for, the freedom, the empowerment, the liberation, it's got to come in light of something you've never seen before. And it's got to come from a place and a force that you've never seen before. You can't use the things that have been destroying you and traumatizing you and holding you back. You can't go with a system that birthed Reconstruction, that birthed convict leasing, that birthed the black codes, that birthed Jim Crow segregation, that birthed redlining, urban renewal, benign neglect, mass incarceration, gentrification, miseducation. All of these things were birthed out of this racial caste system that is literally designed to destroy you and hold you at bay while protecting the wealth of an elite few and buffering using the white collective. And if you don't understand that racism is simply the guardian at the gate of classism, then you've lost the whole thing. Neely Fuller Jr. said some decades ago that if you don't understand white supremacy, how it works, how it impacts you, then everything you do understand will only confuse you. And it's a bunch of confused people walking around because they're seeing things from an unclear, undeveloped place. See, classism is the true enemy. Classism is the protection and the practicing of a elitist class controlling and operating and powering everything. And it controls everything from the vassal position and vassal office of the presidency to major financial institutions across the board. It finances wars from both sides. It does a bunch of things that you can't even imagine. It's behind the idea of depopulation and so much more. What you have to be willing to understand is that it is up to us to understand how the game is played and then play the game to win. I tell people all the time, you might not like the game, you might not like the way the game is played. The more it's unveiled to you and you realize that this whole entire idea of morality that's been taught to us is a farce, and that this country was not built on morality. It was not built on morality. This country was built on the blacks, of black people. Black people who were stolen from their countries, from their continent, and brought over and used and abused for free labor. It is from that the United States got its rapid advance in economy, because of low productivity thresholds, high profit margins based off of free labor. And so it came on the backs of blacks. It was not about anything moral. There's nothing moral about the capture and kidnapping and stealing of an entire people and holding them for 246 years in chattel slavery. And then even after releasing them, consistently re-injuring them through traumatic events like the ones I just named, and all of the while telling them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. See, you can't even understand the mind games at play when they tell you that. See, they show you a few blacks who have succeeded, someone for you to live vicariously through, and then they turn around and they shut the gate. They let you see them and you get to watch them from a distance, and you get to live. That's why we go so hard for our celebrities. That's why we let them get away with so much. Why? Because that's the only way that we believe we can experience true success, true liberation, and true financial freedom, is to live through them. So we fight and we defend them way beyond and past the time we should be calling them to a place of accountability. We've got to be careful about that. What I want to get to here is there are people going around the country that don't represent us, that don't stand for us, that don't sit in a place of concern for our issues and our dilemmas. They are not working a black agenda. They are working their own personal and collective agendas, from Antifa to Black Lives Matter as an organization which does not support black men. That's something that's funded, and both groups are actually funded by George Soros. So you got to be aware of that. There's pictures of non-blacks throwing bricks through windows, pictures of non-blacks looting. There's a picture of white women spray painting BLM on Starbucks and a couple of other buildings in the area. And you know who they're going to blame for that, right? Be careful how you get gassed up. Be careful what you look at. Now, my thing is, if the city burns, the city burns. But don't get caught up in any time, in any way that you're in a place and you're protesting and you look up and people who don't look like you are doing stupid stuff. That's not the time for you to be there. Yes, you got a right to be angry. Yes, you got a right to express yourself. And while I'm not in a direct place at this point in my life and time that I want to be out burning and throwing stuff, if that's where you at, make sure it's your choice, because the consequences that follow are going to land on your shoulder. What you don't want to do is be paying for consequences that are directly connected to someone who worked against your interests using your platform. The gay community has done it to us before. The feminist movement has done it to us before. The white women have done it to us before. We have constantly allowed our movements to be infiltrated. Darren Seals tried to tell us that before they killed him. He tried to tell us what was going on in Ferguson. He tried to tell us that Black Lives Matter wasn't about us. It wasn't about the grassroots, on the ground, boots on the ground movement that was taking place. It was a highly well-funded, organized, nonprofit organization that was usurping the energy and drafting the money away from the true cause. And we now see it. It is a face, a black face funded by a white billionaire who has independent and collective interests outside of what we need to see as blacks. And you've got to understand that while George Soros is a billionaire and he's funding all this, he's just the face of the elitist movement. There are people pulling his strings. There's a lot more at stake at this. And one of the days of this week, I'm going to talk about that. Look, here is what I want to talk about now. Just a couple of days ago, we got a report. First of all, I'm sorry, James. I saw you pop in. Hopefully you're still there. If not, man, I thank you for stopping in for a moment. James is going to war for a young brother who died at the hand of an officer under some very shady conditions right here in the Houston area. Joshua Johnson, keep fighting, brother. We see what you're doing. I want to thank Congressman Al Green for being boots on the ground and very vocal in this. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm sharing all the stuff that you're doing with on all of my platforms. I just want to give you a mad shout out, man. We have to have people like that from all backgrounds, all walks of life, all faiths, all religions, actually standing up and doing what is necessary, going to war for those who can't, standing up, going for those who are unable to do it for themselves, giving voices to family members and so much more. So James, definitely want to thank you. A mad shout out to all of you who are going to war in the Houston area to get justice for Joshua Johnson. It's flying under the radar now because there's so much centered on what's going on with George Floyd, but we've got people who, Joshua Johnson, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. It's happening so fast that you're looking at the anger that we felt for each one of these situations, and now all of a sudden it's culminated with this thing with George Floyd, and we're wondering, where did it come from? How did we get here? Why are we so angry? It's because re-injury over and over and over again. It amazes me how we sit up and you hear people saying it's been 150 years. It's time to let it go. It's time to get over it. You know, it's been 150 years. Don't you think it's time to let it go? And the thing is, it's been about 80 years for Jews. And do you think you could tell any of them, any Jew, that they need to get over the Holocaust? You would probably be sued just for saying it. You definitely would be drugged through the media and ostracized just for the very idea that you would be that disrespectful to sit up and say, to forget something like that. Now, roughly around 12 million Jews, give or take, between 6 and 12 million, depending on who you want to ask, died. We've lost hundreds of millions in the slave trade, in the atrocities of Leopold, in the Congo. I think he got 30 million Congolese by himself. Then we've got hundreds of millions impacted by the transatlantic slave trade, not just here in the U.S., but in Canada, in Central America, in South America, in the Caribbean. And you don't want us, but see, the thing is, what I think is important is that we have to understand the dynamic of multi-generational transmission of trauma and the numerous ways that it takes place, from epigenetics to social learning theory. We've got to understand vicarious positioning and emotion. We got to understand how this thing works. Here's what I can tell you. See, if we just go by the 246 years of chattel slavery, we say, okay, that supposedly ended 155 years ago. We received what I consider to be our quasi-emancipation, our quasi-freedom. We haven't received freedom because we have not yet been freely given access to the things necessary for us to consistently operate and pull ourselves up. We've been kept at bay by policy after policy after policy after policy, right? But hey, let's say now, here's the thing. After 246 years, can anybody tell me where there was this mass effort by the government to give us treatment for the trauma we had experienced? You can send a U.S. soldier or Marine or military personnel into conflict for a 6-month, 9-month tour. When they come back, the vast majority of them have to go through treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. They may have been in one major firefight, or they may have seen something while they were over there that totally blew their minds, children being blown up and all kinds of different things happening, or they may have been caught in this mass firefight where they lost fellow soldiers or fellow Marines, and they're suffering from this after just 6 to 9 months of it. You're talking about generation after generation after generation and no treatment. But see, it didn't stop there. See, there's this thing called traumatic re-injury that levels down and presses down on what's known as traumatic memory. Traumatic memory is the reliving of the traumatic event as if it was happening again. It's not a memory in the sense of you recalling something. It's a memory in the sense of you literally being replanted in it and reliving it. That's traumatic memory. Now imagine, while you're trying to wrestle with on your own because there's no professional help, here comes 12 years of Reconstruction where the Klan rides in the South and reestablishes an antebellum reality. And in establishing this antebellum reality, a lot of the things that were won by the Union Army are now reclaimed by the Confederates. And if you truly look at what happened in the 12 years after the Civil War ended, you could actually sit up and say that the war, first of all, didn't end in 1865, and that the Confederates actually won. Why? Because in 1865, there were the surrender of the generals, and then there was the arresting of the Confederate president, and then it was supposed to be over. But what happened is the Klan organized. Other clandestine and covert organizations came together, and they began to ride at night, bombing Union military installations and shooting up men, and the cost of life and property became too much to bear, and the Union pulled out of the South. And when the Union pulled out of the South, see, that's why you still have Confederate statutes in very important places in the South, because the South see those as heroes. Why? Because they didn't stop fighting after the war was over. They changed how they fought. They took off the uniforms and put on the sheets. And for 12 years, it was the worst place to be if you were black, because they were just lynching you for living. Okay, after that, you went into black codes and convict leasing. What was convict leasing? Convict leasing was this unbelievable slick thing they did where they made everything that the freed slaves did illegal. Vagrancy, begging, anything that would be associated with a group of people who have just been set free but have no work and no place to stay. Imagine, you on a plantation, you set free, you gotta go. Where you going? They're not allowing you to buy land. Now, see, we're just 12 years out. They're not allowing you to buy land. So they create this thing called black codes that make sure you can't get land, make sure that it's going to be difficult for you to do anything. So now you got sharecropping, but sharecropping, they screwing you in that, because every time that it's time to come up and settle up, they make sure that you owe more money than the money you produced, so you never get anything in return. You're starving. My great grandfather who reared me was the son of a sharecropper. He was born in 1909, so he told me stories that you wouldn't believe. He had to quit school in the 2nd grade and go out in the field at 7 years old and work just to help his father make ends meet. That's the kind of lives that they were living. But for the ones who couldn't find any work, couldn't do anything, vagrants, they were given 12 to 15 years for vagrancy. Now here's the thing: once they were locked up, they would come along and lease them back out to the plantations they had been set free from. So now again, they're working for free on the plantations they have been freed from, but they're not earning any money. But the state is earning money from the plantation owner, who is getting labor at a highly reduced rate. They continued doing what they had been doing. Slavery under a new name. You ought to read that book. But then it kept going. It didn't stop there. Redlining kept us from buying homes in areas in which property values were growing, because they would sit up and literally cut any funding to any community that had a black person in it. So that's where a lot of the hostilities between whites, the average white and the average black, began. It was no longer about the wealthy elite against the blacks. It was whites, period. Why? Because whites knew if a black person moved into their community, they would have a lack of funding for business, for community redevelopment, and so much more. That was redlining. Then urban renewal, benign neglect. Well, again, they had policies that starved out black communities. Then it went off into mass incarceration, miseducation, where they sit up, and this is something y'all don't understand, and why there's so much. Joe Biden played a major role in the miseducation of black youth when he fought and literally put in amendments, policies that would not allow the educational department and other departments to fund busing efforts to bus black kids to more affluent districts, where they would have access to more equipment, better education practice, a better environment, less stress, less violence, so much more. He fought that tooth and nail in the 70s. 75 through 77 was him sitting up and coming up with policies to stop that, because he did not, by his own admission, want any black kids missing with his kids. That was going to create a problem for his children. Now you talk about this, and he never changed his move. He kept going and kept writing policies and laws and bills that negatively impacted us all the way up until the into the 2000s, and to the point to where he got to the point to where he was going to be running with Barack Obama, and now all of a sudden he needed the black vote, and they were able to sneak him in under Obama. But the reason that so many white people were okay with Obama was because of Biden. Nobody gets how that game was played. We got our races right here, and we already know what he's going to do, because for him to get this far, he's got to be playing our game, because that's the way the game is set up. You don't get black faces in high places without black faces being willing to play the game the way white people want them to play it. It was the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan that stood up and said in 2009 at a town meeting held by Tavis Smiley, some of the black voices, scholars and everything, and Michelle Alexander was there, Cornel West was there, Tavis Smiley, Michael Eric Dyson, the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, and a few others were there. And one thing that stood out that Minister Farrakhan said, and it's so true when you do the research, is he said that let's not get it twisted. Barack Obama was selected long before he was elected, and he was selected by white people to handle white affairs. And he went on to call and say, we still will stand and protect him, but let's be real and understand what happens in this vassal seat known as the presidency. And so that's that part of it. But we have gone on and on and on with what's known as re-injury. We have never had a chance to truly heal. We have never had a chance to actually get to a point to where we're functioning fully, that we are no longer in a dysfunctional mindset and spiritual state, emotional state, because of the consistent trauma. What we're dealing with isn't PTSD. PTSD is normally a reality that comes from traumatic event. What we're dealing with is what's known as complex trauma. It's far more nefarious than PTSD. Complex trauma is from repetitive traumatic experiences stacked on top of one another. You get you get learned helplessness, and then from those watching and learning from observing those from the previous generation, you get vicarious learned helplessness. You got so many blacks that have watched their parents suffer and struggle and fight that they don't even try. They just have gotten to the point to understand this is our lot in life. That's vicarious learned helplessness. It's what a lot of us have to overcome, but there's no treatment to show us how. There are no programs. That's why I work so hard to do what I do, because there is a way. There is treatment. There is healing. But we have to know it. We have to want it. We have to fight for it. And we have to live it. But this whole thing with George Floyd, you've got one coroner saying there's no evidence whatsoever of asphyxia or strangulation. And one of the easiest things to notice and prove from what I have been told in my research is identifying asphyxiation and strangulation. Number one is particular hemorrhaging that shows up in the eyes, trauma around the point of pressure, and a couple of other things. And here's the thing that it was attributed to in the original report. It was attributed to coronary heart disease or arterial heart disease, arterial disease. And that and also here's the part of the report that really blew my mind, and the probable presence of intoxicants. So we haven't even gotten the toxicology report back, but we're already assuming that there were toxicants involved that exacerbated this quote unquote arterial or cardiovascular disease. This is according to the city's medical examiner. Now, when we get the independent report in, it says that without a shadow of a doubt, cause of death due to asphyxia, and no apparent evidence of arterial or cardiovascular disease. So not only were you off in missing the obvious cause of death, you sit up and you fabricated and you lied about what the contributing factors and underlying factors to the death was. In other words, if that was not a contradicting account of the medical examination by an independent examiner, then this would be the blueprint and the pathway to, even if he gets indicted, being acquitted. Even the coroner said it wasn't murder or homicide. It was due to. Now, let me explain something to you that is common. If you have any understanding of the law, you'll understand this. See, there's this thing in penal code that says if you're participating in a crime and someone dies during the participation of that crime, in most instances, you're going to be held responsible for the person's death. and especially if any way you personally contributed to it. Whether and even if you didn't personally, say for instance, one of your partners shoots somebody and kills somebody while you're robbing them, you're going to get charged with murder too. That's an obvious. But here's what say you break into someone's home and you're robbing them and they have a heart attack. Even if they have an advanced cardiovascular or arterial or coronary heart disease that has them pretty sickly, the fact that they died while you were robbing them and that the intense panic and anxiety attributed to an accelerated heart rate, which probably brought upon cardiac arrest, you are responsible at the very least for involuntary manslaughter. That's at the very least. Now let's say they start to tell you, oh please, I'm having chest pains, I can't breathe. And you ignore what they're saying and continue to take their stuff and let them sit there, stand there and ignore them. Now, at the very least, if they pass away, you're responsible for voluntary manslaughter and possibly third-degree homicide or murder. If you push them down and they die for it, that's third-degree to second-degree murder. You get where I'm going with this? Existing conditions does not exempt a person from being held responsible for another person's death when the actions that they have taken were a part of the contributing factors. It doesn't matter that the person has an existing condition that also contributed. If you wouldn't have been robbing them, if you wouldn't have been stealing out of their house, if you wouldn't have been kneeling on his neck, would he have gone into cardiac arrest? And if the answer is no, then you are still responsible for his death. Now the question is, at what level are you responsible? From what I can see, I refuse to watch the video. So I have some still shots and some explanations and some recollections of what took place in the video. And I have personally sit down and I put all that on paper and I've looked at it. From what I can gather, he knew what he was doing. The man is saying, I can't breathe. And for the asshole, though, let me clarify, the white asshole who stood up and said, who I think is a mayor somewhere in Mississippi, you jackass, who said, if he can say I can't breathe, he's breathing. Well, let me explain it to your asinine, stupid, corn-fed country ass. There are levels of breathing. When a person says, as a person who's had heart attacks, when a person says, I can't breathe, there's the asthmatic, I can't breathe, meaning I'm not getting any oxygen, so I can't even talk. Then there is, I can't breathe at a rate to sustain me. I'm probably going to pass out because even though I'm breathing, it's labored. And labored breathing puts stress on the heart, you jackass. Now, back to what I was saying. He heard this man get to a point where he's even calling out to his dead mom. And you're saying, well, a cop doesn't know he's dead. Actually, he does. This guy has a history with George. This wasn't something that was a happenstance. Again, which leads me to believe that it was purposeful, that it was intentful, that he had finally found his moment and his chance to do something that he had probably wanted to do for a long time. He's an obvious racist. And George Floyd had a white girlfriend, something I don't agree with. And that's a reason why. That and the fact that as soon as he was dead, she was already asking for the guy who killed him to be forgiven. I'll never get that. I don't look. Let me stop. Side note: I need to digress for just a moment here, please. I promise you, I truly believe in the transition and transference of energy. I don't believe energy is ever destroyed. I don't believe anyone ever truly dies. I think that you stop living here physically, and then whatever happens next happens. And I believe that you have a major control in how that functions. I don't know everything yet, but I know that you don't stop existing. I promise you. And if something ever happens to me and my life is taken violently or wrongfully, any of my family get up talking about I'm going to pray for them and I'm going to forgive them, I'm going to hunt you. I'm going to hunt you. I'm going to hunt you. Don't do that. Second of all, I don't want you burning up nothing. Just get the coward that killed me. Get him. Make them pay for it. Give a consequence to my death. Make my life matter by saying this is what you had to pay for by taking his life. That's how you stop things from happening. You apply a consequence. You apply a consequence to actions that you don't want to see happen. If you don't want somebody doing something to you, then you have to apply a consequence. This idea of morality and ethics and that people, the vast majority of people, there's some very good people that do things totally and solely because it's the right thing to do. But I guarantee you the vast majority of people on this planet do things the right way because they are afraid of the consequences. You got a bunch of people that are not stealing because they're afraid to go to jail. You got a bunch of people that ain't spitting on people they hate because they're afraid to get their ass whooped. You got a bunch of people who are sitting up and not going after somebody they really can't stand because they're afraid for that hot lead in their ass. Let's just keep it real. And if you apply a consequence to unwanted actions, those actions stop. David Banner said this on the Rock Newman show a couple of years back, that if a cop came in and wrongfully killed someone, and immediately someone in his family or he himself had to pay a very stiff consequence for that, it would stop. It is the lack of impunity, it's the lack of retribution, it's the lack of consequence that emboldens cowards. See, a coward will hit somebody that won't hit him back. I talk about that all the time when I'm talking about domestic violence. It's easy to hit somebody that can't hit you back or doesn't have the power to defend themselves. You don't show rocks until you stand up to somebody that may be capable of taking you out. That's when you are actually showing rocks. That's when you're sitting up and saying, hey, I'm built like this. I'm about that life. If you're sitting up and taking advantage of people who can't defend themselves, you're not about that life. You're a coward. You're a punk. You're weak. Same thing with anybody that's sitting up, got a gun, and a person is unarmed, and you're sitting up and you're harming them. You got an advantage. Number one, you're hiding behind a badge. Number two, you're hiding behind a gun. You're equalizer. If that's, to me, I'm like this. If you meet that person in an alley and you ain't got your gun and your badge, if you're not finna go straight up with them, then don't go straight up with them when you rolling 15 deep and you got your badge and your gun. That's just another form of gameplay to me. And for all of you that are saying, I'm a good cop, I'm not like that, you need to check your boys. That's how you're going to show me you're a good cop. It's by checking you. But I know all about the blue code, the blue wall of silence. I understand the brotherhood and the fraternity. And I understand what it's like when you're out there and you don't know what you're up against. But a lot of the animosity and the anger and the hatred you're facing is because you got cats like this creating this type of environment for you to go out in. You should want that stuff to stop. Why? Because they're not making it any better for you. Nobody trusts you anymore. Nobody. It used to be you tell your kids if something goes on, go tell a cop. Now it's like, hey, stay the hell away from them. Kids even know now. They don't go to the hood. Kids don't want to have jack to do with cops. Yeah, you protecting and serving over there in River Oaks. You protecting and serving over there in Twin Lakes. You protecting and serving over there in Lakes of Eldridge. But over there in Fifth Ward, over there in Clinton Park, over there in Homestead, over there in Hiram Clark, you raising hell. You picking up kids, taking them around the corner, beating the hell out of them and bringing them back and throwing them out of the car. I done seen all this growing up, so you can't tell me it didn't happen. I saw it with my own eyes. I'm not reading reports. I'm telling you what it's like growing up in the hood, and you can't trust the people who's supposed to be protecting you. But what you're getting to now is an entire new environment where people now are not going to wait and trust or hope you're not going to do anything. If they get the upper hand on you, you may not get a chance to prove that you're a good cop, because you got these quote unquote bad cops acting ass. If you want to prove you're a good cop, check the bad ones. You can still maintain a fraternity and a brotherhood by raising the standard of performance within the fraternity. You can still say, I'm riding with my brothers. You just got to be better at choosing your brothers. That's what I'm sitting up saying. You got to be able to sit up and say, this will not be tolerated within this particular culture. We will not allow it. And then you can sit up and ride or die with your brothers, because you know the brothers that are going out there are doing things the way that you want them done. But you can't sit up and know somebody is screwing over somebody. You can't know that over 1,000 people, 1,000 black boys in Alabama were set up and framed for drug dealing by a unit in that state for over 15 years, sending over 1,000 black men to prison, framing them for it. You can't tell me somebody outside of that didn't know, except the people who were doing it. To me, that's not a good cop. You took an oath to protect and serve the people, not your self-interest or your brother's self-interest. When you step out of line, if the law is the direct line of standard, when anybody breaks it, they got to be held accountable. Not just the citizens, but those responsible for for protecting the law. If you're not going to do it across the board, if you're not going to hold yourself to a higher standard, it's the wrong job for you. If you're going to walk around afraid of dealing with the people you're supposed to be protecting, it's not the job for you. If your your trigger finger is so itchy that it can't wait to light somebody up, this is not the job for you. I'm getting tired of hearing about good cops. No, good cops sit up and stand up. I've got a friend who's a good cop and his career didn't last. That's what I'm talking about. Good cops don't stay cops. Why? Because when you start calling for change and when you start speaking out against wrong, they get rid of you one way or another. He's been fighting for reform in the criminal justice system since the 90s. Can't get any traction from the police department, the fraternity of police, the fraternal order of police, or from politicians all the way up to the president. He tried to work with the Obama administration for the whole 8 years. No reform. No talk. They didn't want to even touch it. But what did happen is Barack Obama signed Blue Lives Matter, which gave the police more protection after they kill you. We're going to call things as they really are around here. We not sugarcoating nothing. I don't have nobody I like in politics, because nobody in politics has never done anything for me and my family and my friends and my race. And so, no, I don't have friends. I have people that I think I may be able to create relationships with to get something done, but I don't like none of you. I don't like you because you ain't never done anything. As soon as you get there, you're either going to find out two things. You're going to start playing the game their way, or you're going to be gone, and that's it. You have to be committed to something around here, or you're going to get taken fast. Back to George, and then I'm done. I know I'm all over the place, but I'm just talking from my heart because I'm seeing my people misled. I'm seeing my people mishandled. I'm seeing my people being dealt with in ways that really trouble me. That really troubles me. Look, the new independent autopsy says he died from asphyxia. Anybody other than Stevie Wonder that saw that video or even saw the still pictures can see that there's a problem. You got that much pressure. This clown had the audacity to not only have his knee on his neck, but he wasn't bracing the rest of the body so that the entire pressure wasn't on the knee. He had all of his weight on his knee. You know that because he has his hand in his pockets while he's doing it. He was so comfortable with taking this man's life and seeing the life ooze out of him that he had his hands in his pockets. Do you know the level of casualty you have to even stand in front of someone and talk to them and put your hands in your pocket? It's something that the average person doesn't think about before a behavioral specialist. You pay attention to all things. You understand what someone's doing and what kind of state. Nobody in an intense or threatened position or threatened situation puts their hands in their pockets. It puts them at a disadvantage. Number one, they can't defend themselves. Number two, the tension that comes from the stress reflex, the fight or flight mode that's created with heightened stress, will not allow you to keep your hands in your pocket. He was so calm, cool, and collective in doing what he did. He had his hands in his pocket. He wasn't even looking at the person that he's supposed to be subduing. He's got his hand in his pocket. He's looking all around at the crowd. He's got his knee on his prey. Pay attention to what's going on. Don't let them pull you off into situations and get you emotionally charged up while they destroy stuff and blame it on you. Get what they want out of the deal and then watch you burn. They've played us so many times. We got to play smart. Something else that I am doing at the Odyssey Project is reaching out to other minds. The Odyssey Project is creating a think tank where great minds will come together, whether it's historians, whether it's lawyers, whether it's psychologists and psychiatrists, whether it is historians, strategists, creative thinkers. But we've got to start putting our minds to the task of taking the energy that we have, like at Trayvon Martin and John Crawford and Eric Garner, Mike Brown, the stuff that came out of Ferguson that we lost energy on. That is absolutely something that we are going to have to be better at. We've got to take this energy and redirect it. Yeah, we're angry, we want to tear up something, but at some point you got to take that anger and that energy that wants to tear up something and decide how you're going to build something. Because see, building something is far more powerful than tearing something down. Because if you build the right thing, you will automatically destroy what you wanted to tear down in the first place. If you build the right thing. So you got to be able to build the right thing. See, we spend so much time, we've been trained. So you got to understand that property destruction for black people goes way back to slavery. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody want to act like they know why we do what we do when we do that. See, property destruction, I'm going to say this and then I'll be done. I'm going to teach you a history lesson. Property destruction came from slaves as a way to get back at a master and a slave overseer in ways that they could not do outward and directly. So when no one was around, they would rip a board off something. They'll push something down, they'll tear it down. Yeah, it'll eventually get fixed back, but it was their way of not complying. And since they didn't own anything they tore up was tearing up something of the master. And so what you got to understand, though, the fastest way to tear down something you don't like is to build something you do. You've got to learn how to build yourself, first of all. We've got to learn how to teach our children, socialize our children into a sense of identity and purpose, socialize our children into a sense of responsibility, aspiration, and anticipation of victory. We've got to stop allowing them to see us acquiesce to the challenges in front of us. We've got to stop allowing them to see us fold underneath the pressure and the pushback of white supremacy. It is time for us to socialize into them their history beyond slavery, their sense of identity. It's time to point out how the very ones who try to marginalize and minimalize who they are in beauty, in presentation, in power and voice, are mimicking them on the sly. See, they want your lips, they want your nose, they want your hips, they want all of the voluptuousness of our women, and they want the staunchness and stroke and power of our men. They won't tell you that up in personal, but they're so desiring it. And when you look at them, that sense of disdain and disgust they're looking at isn't because they think they're better than you, it's because they know you're better. They know what you possess better than you do. But see, we got to teach our children. We've got to teach our children. We've got to teach. When I wrote Miseducation of Black Youth in America 6 years ago, book number 16, we're on book number 21 now, book number 16, I tell you what they're doing to our kids. And I told you it's on us. We need to holistically educate our children. I'm talking beyond the attainment of academic skills. Truly in nature and history. Educating a kid isn't about simply obtaining academic skills. Educating a kid begins with giving them a sense of self that is so invigorating and empowering that it inspires their self-confidence and their self-esteem. It levels them in a place of knowing that if I set my mind to it, I can have it. That absolutely nobody in this world can stop me. It's not about what's on the outside, it's on the inside. There's an African proverb that says, if the enemy on the outside, if there's no enemy on the inside, the enemy on the outside can do us no harm. If there's no enemy on the inside, the enemy on the outside can't mess with us. It's time to start teaching our children who they are. We've got to stay strong, but we've got to come together. I'm challenging every last one of you that we've got to come together. We've got to unify. We've got to start staying with one another. Again, like I said, we've got some great work coming on. We're trying to raise funds now for a 15-city tour where I'm going to be teaching and sharing with community leaders how to implement the programs that I've created over the years, including Black Men Lead, Music is Life, the Black Community Empowerment Initiative, also with Marion's program that we do together, Restoring Ghetto's Forgotten Daughters, dealing with young Black women, dealing with depression, dealing with the weight of childhood molestation, rape, incest, and so much more. 60% on the liberal end of that of Black women are reporting that they experienced some form of childhood sexual abuse as a child. We're not confronting it. It's the elephant in the room. We're sweeping it under the rug. Here's the kicker that nobody wants to talk about. At least 1 in 6 Black men it's happened to. That's an ugly monster, and it's not of us. It's an inheritance from slavery, and we need to deal with it. But I am going to go on a tour, and the reason I'm raising funds is I don't want to charge no one in any city to come in and spend a week with them to teach them the program and get them started and get the network set up so that we can continuously work together through on. I'm going to hit Cleveland, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Charlotte, Chicago, St. Louis, Miami, Los Angeles, New Orleans, and Detroit. And I am putting together a committee that will help me choose the remaining cities that I'll go to. I am excited about that, but we need your support. In the description box of this video, no matter where you see it, you're going to see in the first paragraph several links and our organization's Cash App handle so that you can support the work we're doing. And I'm asking you to definitely support what we're doing, but more importantly, be aware of what's going on. Don't get played. Don't bite on the superficial. Don't take anything at face value. Do your research. If you got a question about something that seems a little fishy, shoot me an email. I'll research it for you. But we've got to get on our game. That's my challenge to you. On that note, I'm out of here. You guys have an unbelievable remainder of your day. Hello everybody, Dr. Rick Wallace here, dropping in with a little special announcement. For those who have followed me for any stretch of time, you know, outside of the businesses that I run, like Myriad Business Solutions, the Visionetics Institute, Odyssey Media Group, I also do a great deal of work inside of the inner city communities in Houston, Dallas, and other areas. I'm asking now, as we push a fundraiser, that you support what the Odyssey Project is doing in the inner cities, especially with programs like Black Men Lead, which is a rite of passage initiative, and Restoring Ghetto's Forgotten Daughters, which is a program focused on helping young girls, but boys as well, suffering from childhood sexual abuse, rape, molestation, domestic abuse, absentee fatherhood, and so many other things. The information will be in the box. Thank you.
From a conceptual perspective, people talk about a desire to be successful. All of the elements